I stayed silent for years to keep my family together, but that silence ended up breaking me. More than any words could. I used to believe silence was a kind of love, the kind that swallowed pain so others could breathe. But the night my own son looked through me like I was furniture, I realized silence can rot a woman from the inside out. My name is Loretta Mae Johnson, and I've lived long enough to know that family can be both your shelter and your storm. I'm the kind of woman folks call Auntie even when we ain't related, because I listen, I pray, and I mind my manners. Or at least I used to. This story starts on a Sunday evening when the house was full but my heart felt empty as an old church after benediction. The smell of collard greens still lingered in the air, mixed with cornbread and something burnt I couldn't quite place. Maybe my pride. I stood by the sink, hands wet, back aching, listening to laughter drift from the living room. That laughter didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to my son Marcus and his wife Vanessa. And somehow, in my own home, I had become the quiet guest. "Ma, we'll be leaving early tomorrow," Marcus called out without looking up. His eyes stayed glued to his phone, thumb moving like he had somewhere better to be. "All right, baby," I said softly. I always said things softly now. Vanessa didn't say a word. She never did unless she had to. Her silence toward me was sharp, intentional. Mine was tired, learned. I watched her from the corner of my eye, long lashes, perfect posture, that polite smile she wore like armor, the kind that says, "I'm respectful, but don't get close." I told myself to keep the peace. I'd been telling myself that for years. When Marcus married Vanessa, I welcomed her like my own. I hosted bridal showers, babysat her niece, even helped with the down payment on their townhouse. I smiled through the moments she corrected my cooking and laughed when she called me old school. I stayed silent when she rearranged my living room without asking. I stayed silent when Marcus stopped calling unless she reminded him. Silence became my offering, my sacrifice, my way of keeping the family together. But silence don't mean peace. Sometimes it just means everybody else gets comfortable hurting you. That Sunday night, after they went upstairs, I sat alone in my favorite chair, the one my late husband bought me after my knee surgery. I ran my hand over the worn armrest and whispered, "Lord, what did I do wrong?" The house answered back with quiet. No footsteps, no warmth, just the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who laughed loud, spoke her mind, and believed her son would always see her. Somewhere along the way, I had shrunk myself so others wouldn't feel crowded. I had folded my voice so it wouldn't disturb their comfort. I didn't know then that this was the beginning of the breaking. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment I bit my tongue, every time I chose family over truth. I told myself tomorrow would be different, that Marcus would remember who raised him, that Vanessa would soften, that love would fix what silence couldn't. But deep down, a quiet truth was stirring, and once it started, it refused to be hushed. The morning I realized my silence had taught my son how to dismiss me, my hands were shaking so bad I spilled coffee all over the counter. It wasn't the burn that hurt, it was the understanding. Some lessons come late and they don't knock when they arrive. Sunlight crept through the kitchen blinds, catching dust in the air like tiny ghosts of things unsaid. I stood there in my housecoat staring at the mess, wondering when I'd become invisible in my own life. Upstairs, I could hear Vanessa's heels clicking, sharp, confident, purposeful. Marcus followed behind her, his footsteps lighter, unsure. That sound alone told me more than any conversation could. "Ma," Marcus said as they came down the stairs, already reaching for his keys. "We're heading out." No good morning, no hug, no pause. I swallowed. "You want breakfast? I can fix you a plate real quick." Vanessa didn't even look my way. "We already ate," she said, sipping her smoothie like she was in a commercial. "We're running late." Running late for what? I wanted to ask. Running away from who? Marcus finally met my eyes, just for a second. There was something there. Guilt, maybe, but it passed too fast. Next time, Ma. That phrase had become his favorite. Next time, as if time was something I had plenty of. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and just like that, the house exhaled. I leaned against the counter, feeling older than my years. My reflection in the microwave door startled me. Tired eyes, graying edges, a woman who had given and given until she forgot what it felt like to receive. I thought about my own mother then, Big Mama Ruth. Lord, that woman didn't hold her tongue for nobody. She believed love told the truth, even when it trembled. Baby, she used to say, peace that costs you your voice ain't peace at all. I'd nodded back then, young and sure I'd do better. Funny how life humbles you. Later that afternoon, I called Marcus, straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. Just checking on you, baby. Call me when you get a chance. My voice sounded polite, too polite for a mother who used to braid his hair and pray over him at night. Hours passed. Evening came, no call. That's when the loneliness crept in. Not loud, but steady. Like a slow leak you don't notice until the room is flooded. I sat at the dining table set for one, listening to the tick of the clock, feeling like an afterthought. In the family I built. I replayed moments I'd brushed aside. Vanessa rolling her eyes when I offered advice. Marcus asking me to stay out of it when I tried to speak up. Me smiling through it all, telling myself, they're just busy. They don't mean it. But meaning and impact don't always shake hands. That night, I opened the old photo album, pictures of Marcus as a boy, gap-toothed smiles, scraped knees, arms wrapped around my neck. You were my whole world, I whispered. When did I become too much? I realized then that silence had made room for disrespect. I had trained them how to treat me by accepting less and calling it love. And something inside me shifted. Not anger yet. More like a quiet awakening, the kind that comes before a storm. I didn't know how or when, but I knew this much. I couldn't keep disappearing for the comfort of others. Not anymore. Because the silence that once held my family together was starting to tear me apart. The first time Vanessa raised her voice at me, my body froze before my mind could catch up. I stood there smiling, nodding, pretending it didn't sting, but something inside me cracked, just a little, and I felt it. It happened on a Thursday afternoon when I stopped by their townhouse unannounced. I used to do that all the time when Marcus was growing up. Pop in with groceries, drop off leftovers, kiss his cheek. Back then, love didn't require an appointment, but Vanessa had rules and I had learned them the hard way. She opened the door halfway, chain still latched. "Oh, Loretta," she said, her smile tight like a pulled thread. "We weren't expecting company." "I know, baby," I said, lifting the bag in my hand. "I made Marcus' favorite pot roast. Thought I'd bring some by." She sighed, actually sighed, before unlatching the chain. "Marcus is on a call, and you really should call first. We have a routine." A routine. Like I was a disturbance, not his mother. I stepped inside, the house spotless in a way that felt cold. No family pictures on the walls, no warmth, just Vanessa's taste everywhere. Gray tones, sharp lines, controlled. She took the bag from me without a thank you and headed for the kitchen. "You can leave it there," she said. "I'll reheat it later." Something in her tone finally made me speak. "Vanessa, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to—" She turned around so fast it startled me. "Loretta, with all due respect, Marcus and I are building our life. We don't need you hovering." Hovering. The word landed heavy on my chest. "I raised that boy," I said quietly. My voice trembled, but I kept going. "Everything I do comes from love." "Well," she snapped, folding her arms, "love doesn't mean control." That's when Marcus appeared in the doorway, phone still in hand. He looked. Between us, tension thick as humidity. "Ma, what's going on?" he asked. Before I could answer, Vanessa spoke. "I'm just setting boundaries." I waited for Marcus to say something, anything, to remind her who I was, to remind himself. Instead, he rubbed his forehead. Ma, you gotta understand. Vanessa's just trying to make things work. Make things work? For who? I felt myself shrinking again like I always did. Years of swallowing words rushed back, pressing against my throat. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted my son to choose me just once. But I didn't. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure for what. I'll call next time. Vanessa nodded, satisfied. Marcus kissed my cheek distractedly. I walked out with my dignity folded small in my purse. In the car, I sat there gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding. That's when it hit me. Not all silence is graceful. Sometimes it's permission. Permission for your child to forget you. Permission for strangers to define your place. Permission for loneliness to move in and unpack. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Vanessa's voice. Hovering, control, boundaries. Funny how nobody talked about boundaries when they needed babysitting or money or advice. Boundaries only showed up when it was time to push me out. I prayed, not the polite kind, but the desperate kind. Lord, I whispered, either give me my voice back or give me the strength to live without them. Because I could feel it now, this family I was so afraid of losing. I was already losing myself inside it, and the silence I'd worn like armor was starting to feel like a coffin. The first tear fell while I was folding laundry, quiet and unexpected, like my heart finally exhaling. It landed on one of Marcus's old t-shirts, the college one I could never bring myself to throw away. That's when I knew. This wasn't just hurt anymore. This was grief. I sat on the edge of the bed, clothes piled around me, and pressed that shirt to my chest. It still smelled faintly like detergent and memory. I remembered washing it years ago while Marcus was home for spring break, music blasting, laughter filling the house. Back then, he needed me, needed my food, my advice, my presence. Somewhere between then and now, I had become optional. I tried to tell myself this was normal. Children grow up, they build lives, mothers step back. That's what folks say, right? But this felt different. This felt like erasure. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. My heart jumped. Hope has a way of embarrassing you like that. I wiped my face and answered. Hey, Ma, Marcus said. His voice was rushed. Listen, Vanessa and I talked, and we think it's best if you don't drop by unannounced anymore. There it was, clean, clear, final. I swallowed hard. All right, I said. One word. Always one word. She just feels like you don't respect our space, he continued. And I need you to try harder, okay? Try harder. I wanted to ask how much harder a woman could try after a lifetime of giving. I wanted to ask why nobody was asking Vanessa to try. But the old habit kicked in. Keep the peace, Loretta. Don't make it worse. I understand, I said. He exhaled, relieved. Thanks, Ma. Love you. The call ended, and I stared at the phone like it had just betrayed me. Maybe it had. Or maybe it was just delivering a truth I'd been dodging. That evening, I went to church even though it wasn't Sunday. I sat in the back pew, letting the quiet wrap around me. The sanctuary smelled like old wood and anointing oil. I bowed my head, hands clasped tight. Lord, I prayed. I gave my best years to that boy. Did I give too much? Did I teach him love wrong? No thunder answered, just a calm, steady feeling settling in my chest. And for the first time, I heard something inside myself say, "You matter too." Driving home, I realized how empty my calendar had become. No calls, no visits, just long days and longer nights. Old age loneliness doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in slowly, pretending to be peace. But it's not peaceful. It's heavy. I started noticing things differently. How nobody asked how my doctor's appointment went. How holidays were rotated now and I always seemed to get the shorter end. How Vanessa's needs were always urgent and mine were always flexible. I had mistaken endurance for love. I had believed being quiet made me noble. but all it did was make me small. That night, I stood in the bathroom looking at my reflection. "You're still here," I whispered to myself, "and you deserve better than silence." I didn't know what speaking up would cost me. I didn't know how Marcus would react, but I knew this much. If I kept swallowing my pain, there wouldn't be enough of me left to save. Something was coming. I could feel it. And once my voice returned, it wouldn't be easy to put back away. The invitation came through text, short and carefully worded, like everything Vanessa did. "Dinner at our place this Saturday, 6 p.m. No smiley face, no warmth, just obligation dressed up as courtesy." I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect what little peace I had left. But another part, the mother in me, the woman who still hoped, said maybe this was a turning point. Maybe this was reconciliation. Silence has a funny way of making you believe in miracles that haven't earned your faith. "I'll be there," I typed back. Saturday came, and I dressed with intention. Not flashy, not faded. I chose a soft blue dress, the one my sister said brought out my eyes. I put on my pearl earrings. Nothing loud, just dignified. If I was going to walk into tension, I'd do it standing tall. Their townhouse looked the same from the outside, neat and trimmed, no sign of the storm waiting inside. Vanessa opened the door with that practiced smile. "Loretta," she said, "come in." Marcus hugged me, quick but familiar enough to stir my heart. "Hey, Ma." Dinner was polite, too polite. The kind where forks scrape plates louder than conversation. Vanessa talked about work. Marcus nodded along. Nobody asked about me. I filled the silence with small comments, memories, laughter that felt a beat too late. Halfway through dessert, Vanessa cleared her throat. My chest tightened. I knew that sound. "So," she said, folding her napkin carefully, "Marcus and I have been talking." Marcus shifted in his seat. Wouldn't look at me. "We think it's time we address some things," she continued. "Some patterns." Patterns, that word again. I waited. Years of waiting had trained me well. "Loretta," Vanessa said, meeting my eyes now, "you have a tendency to make Marcus feel guilty." My breath caught. Guilty for what? "For living his life," she replied smoothly, "for choosing his wife, for setting boundaries." I looked at my son. "Marcus?" He sighed. "Ma, sometimes you lay it on thick. The sacrifices, the past, it makes things hard. Hard." I felt like the floor tilted. Everything I had carried, late nights, scraped knees, prayers whispered over his sleeping body, reduced to laying it on thick. I never meant. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. I just wanted to stay connected. Vanessa leaned back. But that connection feels heavy. That was it. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not wild, but firm. "I stayed silent for years," I said slowly. "I stayed silent when I felt pushed aside. I stayed silent when I was lonely. I stayed silent so you two could be comfortable." They both stared at me, surprised. I guess they weren't used to me speaking in full sentences about my pain. "I thought my silence was love," I continued, "but all it did was teach you how to live without considering me." Marcus's eyes softened for a moment. "Ma, I'm not finished," I said gently but clearly. My heart was pounding. "I'm not asking to control your life. I'm asking not to be erased from it." The room went quiet. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Well," she said after a pause, "this is exactly the kind of emotional pressure I'm talking about." There it was, my truth labeled as manipulation. I stood up, hands trembling but spine straight. "I see now," I said, "and I won't beg to be valued." Marcus stood too. "Ma, wait." "I love you," I told him, tears finally spilling, "but I won't keep breaking myself to keep the peace." I walked out before either of them could stop me, heart aching, but lighter somehow. The silence I left behind wasn't mine anymore. For the first time, I chose myself. The drive home felt longer than it ever had, every red light giving my thoughts another chance to wound me. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it might disappear if I let go. I had finally spoken, and now I had to live with what my truth had cost me. The house greeted me with darkness and stillness. No laughter, no judgment. Just the familiar creak of the floorboards and the quiet hum of a life that had been waiting patiently for me to return to myself. I kicked off my shoes, set my purse down, and stood there breathing like I'd just survived something dangerous. Because I had. I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television screen, replaying every word from that dinner. Vanessa's cool tone, Marcus's silence, the way my son looked, torn but still chose not to choose me. That hurt worse than anything she said. I thought speaking up would bring relief instantly. But truth has an aftertaste, and that night it was bitter. The phone buzzed around midnight. My heart jumped before my pride could stop it. Marcus's name flashed across the screen. "Ma," he said quietly, "you didn't have to leave like that." I closed my eyes. I did. There was a pause. "Vanessa thinks you were trying to guilt trip us." I let out a slow breath. "Marcus, I spent years saying nothing so nobody would feel uncomfortable. Tonight was the first time I told the truth." "I know," he said, "but you have to understand. My wife comes first now." That sentence landed like a final nail. "I understand marriage," I said softly. "What I don't understand is why loving you means I have to disappear." He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "I don't want to be in the middle." I almost laughed. Almost. "Baby, when you stay silent, you're already choosing a side." The call ended without resolution. No apology, no promise, just distance. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I wandered from room to room, touching old memories, the picture frames, the quilt my aunt stitched, the chair where my husband used to sit before the Lord called him home. Loneliness sat beside me, but it felt different now, less like punishment, more like clarity. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a strange calm. I made myself breakfast. I watered the plants. I opened the curtains wide and let the light in like I deserved it. For the first time in a long while, my day didn't revolve around waiting for a call that might never come. Still, the ache lingered. Old age loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's about being forgotten while you're still here. I went to the community center that afternoon, something I'd been meaning to do for years. Joined a women's Bible study, sat in a circle of aunties who knew that kind of pain, the kind that comes from loving your children more than they know how to love you back. One woman squeezed my hand and said, "Baby, sometimes God removes people from your daily life so you can finally hear Him." That stayed with me. When I got home, I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, just quiet. But this time, the quiet didn't accuse me. It rested. I realized then that my silence hadn't just protected my family, it had protected their comfort at the expense of my dignity. And reclaiming my voice didn't mean I stopped loving my son. It meant I started loving myself too. I didn't know what the future held, reconciliation or distance, healing or heartbreak. But I knew one thing for certain. There was no going back to who I was before. 3 weeks passed without a word from Marcus, and each day felt like a quiet test of my resolve. I woke up expecting the ache to lessen, but some mornings it sat heavier than the day before. Healing, I learned, doesn't move in straight lines. It circles you like it's deciding whether you're ready. I kept busy on purpose. Morning walks, Bible study on Wednesdays, volunteering at the food pantry on Fridays. Women there started calling me Auntie Loretta, and something about that name wrapped around my heart like a warm shawl. It reminded me I still had a place in this world, even if it wasn't centered around my son anymore. Still, nights were hard. I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker on, wondering if Marcus ever thought about me when the day slowed down. Did he remember the way I used to wait up for him in high school? The way I'd leave the porch light on so he could find his way home? One Thursday evening, my phone rang while I was folding towels. I didn't rush this time. I finished folding, then looked. Marcus. I sat down before answering. "Hello?" "Ma," he said. His voice sounded different, softer. "Can we talk?" My heart beat faster, but I kept my tone steady. "I'm listening." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. Vanessa and I had a fight. I didn't respond right away. I'd learned that silence, when chosen, could be powerful. "She said I don't defend her enough," he continued, "that I'm too attached to you." Attached, even now. "And what do you think?" I asked gently. He sighed. "I think I'm tired. I think I don't know how to make everybody happy." I closed my eyes. "Baby, it's not your job to make everybody happy." Another pause. "I miss you," he finally said. Those 3 words hit me harder than all the others. My throat tightened. "I miss you too." "But Vanessa feels like you judge her," he said quickly, like he needed to balance the scales. "She says your silence feels passive-aggressive." I almost smiled. Funny how my silence used to be acceptable until it wasn't. He didn't argue. "I love you, Marcus," I said, "but I can't go back to pretending I don't feel what I feel." "I know," he whispered. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we were standing on the edge of something honest. Then he said it. "She doesn't want me coming by alone." There it was, the line drawn in sand. I let the words settle before answering. "That's her choice," I said, "just like it's mine not to beg." "Ma, I raised you to be a good man," I continued. "Not a perfect one. If you choose your marriage, I'll respect that. But don't ask me to disappear to make it easier." He was quiet for a long time. "I don't want to lose you." I swallowed. "Then don't." The call ended gently, but without promises. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of loving someone who might never fully return to you. That night, I prayed for my son. Not that he'd choose me, but that he'd learn courage. Because love without courage turns into resentment, and resentment poisons everything it touches. I realized then that reconciliation isn't always about reunion. Sometimes it's about redefining the relationship so it stops destroying you. I didn't know what Marcus would decide, but I knew what I had: my voice, my boundaries, my worth, and I wasn't giving those up again. The call from the hospital came on a Tuesday morning, sharp enough to split my calm clean in two. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when the nurse said my name like it carried weight. "Ms. Johnson, your daughter-in-law has been admitted." For a moment, I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, heart racing like it remembered how to worry before my mind could catch up. Vanessa, hospital. Those words didn't belong together in my head, but life has a way of rearranging things without asking permission. "What happened?" I asked, already reaching for my purse. "Stress-related complications," the nurse said carefully. "Your son is here. He asked that we notify family." Family. That word again. I drove to the hospital with my thoughts tangled and loud. Part of me felt concern, real, human concern. Another part felt guarded, like I was stepping back into a fire I'd just escaped. I prayed the whole way there, not for forgiveness, not for acceptance, just for clarity. Marcus was pacing the waiting room when I arrived. His face softened when he saw me, and before I could stop myself, I opened my arms. He walked right into them, holding on longer than expected. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "I'm here," I replied. No conditions, no bitterness. Vanessa was asleep when we went into her room, monitors humming softly. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of her sharp edges by exhaustion and fear. I stood at the foot of the bed, unsure of my place. Marcus leaned close to me. "She asked about you." That surprised me. "She did?" He nodded. said she didn't realize how much pressure she's been carrying or how much she put on everyone else. I didn't say, including me, but the thought hovered. When Vanessa woke, her eyes landed on me first. There was no smile, no frown either, just vulnerability. "Loretta," she said softly. It was the first time she'd ever said my name without tension attached. "I hope you're feeling better," I said. Simple, honest. She swallowed. "I owe you an apology." The room went still. "I've been controlling," she continued, voice trembling. "I was afraid of losing Marcus, and I thought keeping you at a distance would protect my marriage. I didn't realize how much pain I was causing." I looked at my son. His eyes were wet. "I accept your apology," I said after a moment. "But understanding doesn't erase hurt. That takes time." She nodded. "I know. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to do better." I appreciated the words, but I'd lived long enough to know words are easy in hospital rooms. "I want peace," I said, "but not at the cost of my voice." Marcus reached for my hand. "I should have stood up for you sooner." That one sentence nearly broke me, not because it fixed everything, but because it acknowledged something I'd been carrying alone. Afterward, I sat in my car and cried. Not from sadness alone, but from release. Sometimes life bends you just enough to remind everyone where the breaking point is. Over the next few days, Marcus checked in more. Vanessa sent a text. Short, respectful, real. I didn't rush to fill the space between us. I let it breathe, because this time I wasn't afraid of silence. I knew the difference now between peace and erasure. Something had shifted, not magically, not completely, but enough to feel. Enough to give me hope without stealing my dignity. Still, deep down, I wondered if this moment would hold, or if old patterns would find their way back in. Experience had taught me one thing. Family doesn't change all at once. It reveals itself in layers, and the next layer was already waiting. Peace has a way of testing you right after you think you've earned it. Just when I started breathing easier, life leaned in and whispered, "Not so fast." Because healing in families never travels alone, it brings truth with it. 2 weeks after Vanessa came home from the hospital, Marcus invited me to lunch. Just me. No group text. No hesitation. When I saw his name pop up with, "Can we talk?" my stomach tightened. Not with fear, but with readiness. We met at a small diner halfway between our homes, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been there since sunrise. Marcus stood when I walked in, pulling out my chair like he used to when he was trying to impress me as a teenager. "Thank you for coming, Ma," he said. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, and I meant that. For both of us. We ordered, exchanged small talk, danced around the real reason we were there. Finally, Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes serious. "I need to tell you something," he said. I nodded. "Go on." He took a breath. "Vanessa and I have been struggling longer than you know. Control, expectations, me avoiding conflict, you being the easiest one to push aside." That honesty landed heavy but clean. "I let it happen," he continued, "because confronting her felt harder than disappointing you." There it was. The betrayal I'd felt but never heard spoken aloud. "I thought you'd always be there," he said, voice cracking. "I thought you were strong enough to take it." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Strength isn't meant to be used as a shield against accountability. He nodded, tears slipping free. "I know that now." He told me they were starting counseling. Real counseling. Not the kind where you go once and pretend everything's fine. He admitted he was afraid of losing his marriage, of losing himself, of losing me. "I don't want a life where my mother feels like an obligation," he said, "or a threat." I squeezed his hand. "Then you'll have to learn how to stand up in love, even when your voice shakes." That afternoon, I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years, not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally been invited to the table. But peace doesn't mean comfort. A few days later, Vanessa asked if we could talk. Just the two of us. My chest tightened again, but I agreed. We met at my house. Neutral ground, familiar walls. She sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped. "I'm learning some things about myself," she said. "Uncomfortable things." I waited. "I've always needed control," she admitted. "When I felt threatened, I tightened my grip. And you?" She looked up at me. "You represented a love I couldn't compete with." I studied her carefully. "Love isn't a competition unless someone makes it one." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." We talked for over an hour. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. I didn't soften my story to spare her feelings, and she didn't interrupt. That mattered. When she left, she hugged me. Tentative, respectful. I didn't read too much into it. Growth isn't proven by gestures. It's proven by consistency. That night, alone in my bed, I thought about how close I'd come to disappearing completely, how silence almost convinced me I didn't matter. I whispered a quiet thank you, to God, to myself, to the woman I'd become brave enough to be. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the lesson, because families don't just test your patience, they test your boundaries, and the real test was still coming. Just when I started believing honesty had finally earned me a seat at the table itself got flipped. Because family peace, I learned, can be fragile when it's built on years of buried resentment. And resentment doesn't disappear, it waits. The first sign came quietly. Marcus stopped calling as often, not completely, just enough to feel familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. Vanessa's messages became polite again instead of open, courteous, distant, like she was doing the right thing without feeling it. I told myself not to panic. Healing takes time. Counseling stirs things up before it settles them down. That's what I told myself while folding laundry, while watering my plants, while pretending my heart didn't recognize the pattern returning. Then one evening, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw his face. Drawn, tired, carrying more than he knew how to set down. "Ma," he said, stepping inside. "We need to talk." Those words have a way of stealing the air from a room. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to help him with homework. He rubbed his hands together like he was bracing himself. "Vanessa's mother is moving in with us," he said. I blinked. "Oh." "She needs help," he continued quickly. "Health issues. It's temporary." Temporary. That word had fooled me before. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he added. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." But something inside me stirred, a quiet alarm. "And," he said, hesitating, "Vanessa thinks it might be complicated if you visit while her mom is there." There it was. My voice stayed calm, but my heart felt like it dropped straight through the floor. "Complicated? How?" "She feels like too many opinions in the house could cause stress," he said. "And with her mom being sensitive..." I leaned back in my chair, memories rushing in, being asked to call first, not drop by, not hover, not pressure, always adjusting, always yielding. "So let me understand," I said evenly. "Her mother can live with you, but I should stay away?" Marcus looked down. "It's not like that." "It feels exactly like that." He sighed. "Ma, I'm trying to keep the peace." I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, my voice was steady, but different. "At whose expense?" He didn't answer. I stood up slowly. "I will not compete with anyone for a place in my son's life. Not your wife, not her mother, not anyone." "That's not fair," he said. I met his eyes. "Neither is asking me to shrink again." Silence filled the kitchen, thick and familiar, but this time I didn't rush to fill it. "I love you," I continued, "but I won't accept a relationship that only works when I'm invisible." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to make this right." I softened just a little. You start by not asking the wrong person to sacrifice. After he left, I sat alone, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. I realized something important then. Growth doesn't erase old instincts. Under pressure, people reach for what's familiar. For Marcus, that meant expecting me to bend. But I was done bending. That night, I prayed again. Not for unity, not for approval, but for strength to keep my boundaries, even when love pulled at them. Old age loneliness still visited me, but it no longer owned me. I was learning that being alone with self-respect was better than being included through erasure. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I would not go back to silence, not this time. The tension in the house was subtle at first, like a shadow stretching across the floor without notice. But soon, every visit, every call, every "how are you?" carried the weight of unspoken rules. I began to realize that family can be present and absent at the same time, and sometimes the absence of respect hurts more than absence itself. It was a Saturday afternoon when it became undeniable. I had stopped by Marcus and Vanessa's place to drop off some baked sweet potato pies. I thought it would be simple. Warmth, tradition, a slice of home for the people I loved. The door opened and Vanessa's mother was there. She looked frail, eyes wide and polite. I smiled, introducing myself gently as I always did. "Loretta, it's lovely to meet you," she said. Her voice quivered, not with malice, but with nerves. I could see why. Anyone stepping into a household already thick with tension would feel that. Vanessa appeared behind her, cool and composed. "Ma, I'm glad you're here," she said. "Mom's been adjusting." I offered my smile, but my heart was alert. Something in Vanessa's posture, the way she kept her hands folded, told me she was measuring every word, every action. And for the first time, I understood clearly. I wasn't just being asked to step back. I was being tested. Marcus stepped up, smiling nervously. "Thanks for bringing the pies, Ma. Let's sit down." We sat. The pies were passed. Conversation started, but it wasn't relaxed. Vanessa's mother had questions, yes, but not about me, about Marcus, about their routines. I stayed quiet for a moment, observing, holding my boundaries. Then Vanessa spoke, sharp and measured. "Ma, it's best if you don't give advice without being asked. It confuses my mom." I felt the old fire flare. That familiar sting I had fought for so long, the feeling of being erased, rose up my spine. I set my fork down slowly. "Vanessa, I am not here to compete or confuse. I am here to love my son. I am his mother, and I have the right to speak when it matters to me." She blinked, as if she had expected me to bend, as if bending was the default. Marcus looked down at his hands, silent. Her mother, sensing tension, said softly, "Maybe we can all just enjoy the pies." I took a deep breath. Yes, but enjoying doesn't mean pretending things aren't true. The room went quiet. I could feel the weight of every unspoken rule, every boundary I'd been asked to shrink to, pressing down. I stayed firm. I didn't apologize for being present. I didn't soften to fit comfort. Marcus finally looked up. "Ma, maybe we should talk later, privately." I nodded, standing. "We will. But understand this. I will not allow my voice to be silenced in my own family, even if it makes people uncomfortable." The rest of the visit was careful, polite, but something shifted. A subtle respect emerged, hesitant, unsure, but there nonetheless. When I drove home, the autumn leaves swirling around my car like fire, I realized the truth of motherhood and family life. Love is rarely easy. Sometimes it demands confrontation. Sometimes it demands courage. And sometimes it demands that you risk being misunderstood to preserve your own dignity. That night, I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. Loneliness whispered, yes, but this time it was a quiet companion, not a tyrant. because I had learned how to honor myself, even when love complicated the space between us. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that the real tests were just beginning. The phone rang late that evening, a sharp, unexpected sound slicing through the quiet of my living room. I hadn't heard from Marcus all day, and when I saw his name flash across the screen, my heart jumped with a mix of hope and caution. Experience has a way of teaching you that hope and caution must walk together. "Ma," he said, voice tight, almost fragile. "Can I come over? I need to talk." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Of course, baby. I'll be here." An hour later, he arrived. The front door clicked, and there he was, my son, older, taller, weighed down with worries that weren't his alone, but had been shared over years of silence and misunderstanding. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. The air between us was heavy but not hostile. The weight of things left unsaid hovered, demanding attention. "Ma," he began, voice trembling. "I've been avoiding conversations, avoiding conflict, avoiding you." I felt my chest tighten. Avoiding me. The words cut deep, but they were honest. I've been afraid of upsetting Vanessa, afraid of upsetting her mother, afraid of disappointing you, he confessed. I leaned back, hands clasped together. "Baby, life isn't built on avoiding discomfort. Love requires honesty. Sometimes it requires confrontation." He looked down at the table. "I know. I don't know how to stand in the middle without breaking something." I reached out, taking his hand gently. "You're learning, baby. That's all any of us can do. But you have to understand this. Avoiding your mother's presence to keep peace isn't love. It's fear." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I don't want to lose you, Ma." "You won't lose me," I said softly, feeling a rush of both relief and sorrow. "But you need to start practicing courage. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels messy, that's how love grows." He nodded, tears spilling over. I think I've been running too long. I've let fear dictate my choices, and it's been hurting everyone I love." I squeezed his hand. "It's never too late to change course, baby, but change begins with the willingness to stand, even when others resist, even when love demands you risk the relationship to preserve your dignity and your integrity." We sat there a long while, neither of us speaking, just feeling the truth settle between us. The air seemed lighter, though the storm hadn't passed. The lesson wasn't over. Life wasn't simplified. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were standing on the same ground. Before he left, Marcus hugged me tightly. I could feel the weight of his guilt, his love, and his fear all wrapped up together. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, "for not giving up on me, on us." I smiled, brushing his hair back. "I could never give up on you, baby, but I will never let my voice be erased again. Remember that." He nodded, understanding without words, and when the door closed behind him, I felt a mixture of hope and exhaustion. Families test us in ways that sometimes feel unbearable, and love doesn't come without sacrifice. But some sacrifices, the ones that demand your silence, your comfort, your very identity, are too high a cost to pay. That night, I prayed again, not for resolution, not for a perfect reunion, but for courage, for Marcus, for Vanessa, and most of all, for myself. Because I knew this. Reclaiming my voice had shifted the balance, and now nothing would ever be the same. The first Sunday after that conversation, I woke up with a strange mix of calm and unease. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. No, it felt like it had space to breathe, like I had finally carved out a corner of dignity in a life that had tried to crowd me out for years. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging thought. How long could this fragile peace hold? I decided to attend church that morning, taking my usual seat in the back pew. The familiar smell of polished wood and incense wrapped around me, soothing some of the tension that had lodged in my chest. I closed my eyes during the opening prayer, letting the words settle over me. Lord, give me patience. Give me wisdom. Give me strength to love without erasing myself. Amen. After the service, I lingered by the doors, chatting quietly with other members. Some of the younger women called me Auntie, and I laughed softly, sharing advice I'd learned over the decades. Yet even amid warmth, I felt the pull of home, the tension waiting there like an unwelcome guest. When I returned, the mailbox held a small envelope. I tore it open and found a handwritten note from Vanessa. The words were carefully chosen, polite, yet tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Loretta, thank you for giving Marcus and me space to grow. I know I've caused pain. I hope we can start again. Slowly. Vanessa. I set it down, taking a deep breath. This was progress, but slow, deliberate, fragile. I didn't rush to call her back. Not yet. Some things needed time to take root. Later that afternoon, Marcus came by. He looked tired but steady, the kind of steadiness that comes from facing your own mistakes. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea, listening to the faint hum of neighborhood life. I'm trying, Ma, he said quietly, trying to balance everything, her, me, you. I nodded. I know, baby, but balancing shouldn't mean erasing anyone, and that includes you. He ran his hands over his face. I just don't want to hurt anyone, but I see now that avoiding pain doesn't prevent it. It just spreads it around. That's right, I said softly. Running from conflict doesn't protect love, it corrodes it. We sat in silence for a while, not awkward, not tense, just two people trying to navigate a complicated family. I felt a quiet pride in him, in the man he was striving to become. That evening, I prepared dinner for myself, sitting at the table with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. Loneliness was still there, an old, familiar friend. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was a reminder of my own strength, my own voice, and my right to insist on respect. As I cleaned the kitchen afterward, I reflected on how far I had come. Years of silence had brought me here, to this fragile understanding. And while I knew the road ahead would not be easy, I also knew I wouldn't walk it shrinking myself again. Sometimes, I realized, the most courageous thing a woman can do is love fiercely, without losing herself. And some of the hardest lessons come when the ones we love most are also the ones who challenge us the deepest. That night, I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in a long while, not because everything was fixed, but because I had taken my first steps toward being truly seen, truly heard, and truly respected. And deep inside, I knew the coming days would test this newfound strength even more. It started with a call that made my heart pound before my mind could catch up. Vanessa's voice on the line was quieter than usual, tentative, almost afraid. Loretta, can we talk? I paused, fingers frozen over the phone. This was not a request I could take lightly. Our history had taught me caution, patience, and the need to protect my own dignity. I exhaled slowly. Of course, I said softly. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the next afternoon. I arrived early, taking a booth in the corner, the one that let me see everyone who entered without being too conspicuous. When she walked in, her steps were measured, hesitant, her hands clutching a small purse like a lifeline. Loretta, she said, almost whispering, thank you for coming. I smiled gently, offering the warmth I could afford without giving away the full depth of my hurt. I'm glad you asked me to. Let's just be honest with each other today. She nodded, sliding into the booth across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke, letting the weight of past grievances hang between us. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the hospital, she began, about my controlling behavior, about how I pushed you away. I didn't realize how much it hurt you, Marcus, or even myself. I leaned back, studying her face. Acknowledging it is the first step, Vanessa. But change isn't just words, it's action. You have to be willing to let go of fear, even when it feels uncomfortable. her eyes filled with tears. I know, and I want to. I really do. I want us to have a real relationship, not one dictated by my insecurities. I nodded. That's a start. But understand this. Relationships are earned. They're built on respect, honesty, and consistency. I won't erase myself to make it easier for you. She swallowed hard, nodding again. I understand, and I'm willing to try, to really listen, to make peace, not just appearances. I felt a glimmer of hope, careful and cautious, but real. Good. That's all I'm asking. We talked for over an hour, the conversation turning from past grievances to practical steps. She admitted she needed to take counseling seriously, not just for Marcus, but for herself. She asked for advice, real advice, not what she thought she should hear. For the first time, I realized she might genuinely want change, and I felt a strange combination of relief and apprehension. Hope is fragile when you've been wronged repeatedly. When we parted, she hugged me, this time without tension, without pretense. A brief touch, but it carried weight. I felt the shift, small but undeniable. Driving home, I thought about how far I had come. From a woman who stayed silent for fear of breaking the family, to a woman who had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her self-respect. The road had been hard, filled with moments of betrayal, frustration, and heartbreak, but it had also been a journey toward clarity. That night, I sat by the window with my Bible open, the city lights sparkling outside like tiny reminders that life moves on, even when we are learning to navigate its complexities. I prayed not for perfection, but for strength. Strength to maintain boundaries, to love without losing myself, and to continue guiding my son while respecting the evolving relationships around him. Because families are complicated, love is messy, and sometimes the hardest battles are fought not with fists or words, but with quiet courage and unwavering integrity. I closed my eyes, letting the calm settle over me, knowing that more tests were coming, but also knowing I was finally ready to meet them. It was late October when the tension reached a new height, the kind that makes a house feel smaller than it is and hearts heavier than they should be. Marcus called me that morning, voice tight and uncertain. "Ma, we need you at the house. Vanessa, she's upset again, and I don't know how to handle it." I paused, the weight of years pressing down. I could sense the storm before I even stepped inside. "Still," I said, "I'll be there, baby. Don't try to handle it alone." When I arrived, the townhouse felt charged. Vanessa's mother sat in the living room, knitting quietly, but her eyes flickered nervously toward us. Vanessa stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. And Marcus looked torn, like he'd been standing on a cliff for days without knowing how to descend safely. "I didn't ask for this, Ma," Marcus said quietly as I stepped inside. She's just so sensitive today. I don't know what to do." I placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Baby, it's okay. You don't need to do it alone." Vanessa's voice broke through, sharp and quick. "Loretta, why are you always here? Can't you give me some space?" Her tone stabbed at me, familiar and painful. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Vanessa," I said softly but firmly, "I'm here because I love Marcus, and I am not here to compete. I am here to be honest, to set boundaries, and to respect this household without erasing myself." She opened her mouth as if to argue, but I held up a hand. "Stop for a moment. I am not your enemy, but I am not invisible either. Respect me, respect my son, and we can all coexist." Her mother interjected in a quiet, trembling voice, "Perhaps we should all just take a moment." Marcus sank into the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "Ma, I just want peace." "Peace doesn't come from silence, baby," I said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "It comes from truth, honesty, and boundaries. You've learned that, now you need to live it." Vanessa's arms dropped, but her jaw remained tight. She was listening, though I could see the resistance in her posture. I spoke slowly, carefully, laying my words like bricks in a foundation. I will not disappear for comfort. I will not shrink to fit someone else's fear. I am still Marcus's mother. And if that is too much for you right now, we need to work through it, not around it. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to pause. It was a fragile, tense silence, but it was honest. For once, no one was pretending, no one was hiding. Marcus finally looked up, eyes wet. "Ma, thank you. I needed to hear that. I needed you to say it." Vanessa exhaled slowly, nodding like she was absorbing the truth for the first time. I want to try," she admitted. "I really do. I don't want to fight anymore." I smiled gently, letting my shoulders relax. Then we begin with small steps, listening, understanding, patience, and above all, honesty. We spent the next hour talking, not arguing, not avoiding, but talking. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter, like maybe family didn't have to hurt this badly to be together. That night, driving home, the autumn wind on my face felt like a cleansing. I realized that standing firm, speaking truth, and insisting on respect hadn't destroyed my family. It had saved pieces of it that might have been lost forever. And though the road ahead would still be rocky, I knew something important. Courage doesn't mean there won't be storms. Courage means showing up anyway, even when the storm looks like it might break you. I closed the door behind me, the house quiet, and whispered, "I am still here, and I will not disappear again." The morning sun filtered through my kitchen window, warm and golden, like a promise that even broken things could heal. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence settle. Not the kind that presses and isolates, but the kind that feels steady, earned. After years of hiding my voice, of shrinking to keep others comfortable, I finally understood the power of standing firm. Marcus called mid-morning. His voice was lighter than it had been in months, carrying the ease of someone beginning to unlearn old patterns. "Ma, Vanessa, and we talked last night. Really talked. And I want to thank you." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'm glad, baby. But remember, it's not just about thanks. It's about living differently now." "I know," he said softly, almost reverently. "And I want to. I want to learn how to balance love and honesty, how to respect you, my wife, and myself." That call ended, and I sat back, letting the morning sunlight fill the kitchen. I thought about the journey, the years of silence, the swallowed words, the nights of loneliness that had once crushed me. Each moment had led me here, to clarity, to strength, to the recognition that I mattered even when others forgot. Later that afternoon, Vanessa stopped by. She knocked softly, almost timidly. When I opened the door, she looked different. Less guarded, more human, like the walls she'd built around herself were finally cracking. "Loretta," she said, offering a tentative smile. "I wanted to say thank you for everything, for not giving up, for being patient, even when I didn't deserve it." I stepped aside to let her in. "You're welcome," I said, softly but firmly, "and I accept your apology. But remember, apologies are only the beginning. Actions have to follow." She nodded. "I know, and I'll try." We sat together in my living room, sipping tea, sharing stories. No tension, no pretense, just a fragile but real connection forming. For the first time, I could see her as an ally rather than a challenger, a person learning, just like I had. Marcus joined us later. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and love I hadn't felt in months. "Ma," he said, voice steady, "thank you for standing your ground. I needed to see how strong love really is." I reached out, taking his hand. "Strength isn't about silence, baby. It's about honesty, boundaries, and the courage to protect your heart without hurting others unnecessarily." That evening, I sat alone again, not out of loneliness, but reflection. I thought about my life, The years of sacrifice, the moments of betrayal, the quiet nights of doubt, and realized something profound. I had survived. Not because I bent to fit everyone else's expectations, not because I swallowed my voice to maintain peace, but because I finally learned that self-respect is inseparable from love. My son, my daughter-in-law, even her mother, they were still works in progress, and so was I. But for the first time, I felt a steady certainty. I would no longer disappear to keep anyone comfortable. I would continue to speak, to love, to set boundaries, and to live fully, even when it was uncomfortable. As I closed my Bible that night and prepared for bed, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for a perfect family, none exist. Not for smooth days, those are rare. But for courage, for voice, and for the realization that standing firm in love can save the heart, even if it trembles. I lay down, peaceful at last, knowing that silence had once almost broken me, but speaking my truth had finally set me free.